Okay, this is 8th grade activity 5.1. In this activity, students will explore the properties of complementary and supplementary angles and use this knowledge to classify a pair of angles. The standard covered in this lesson is 8G5. The page numbers out of the hardcover book are pages 184 through 189, and out of the practice journal, pages 95 through 98. To start out with this lesson, you're going to go ahead and want to open up your practice journal to page 95. We'll be working this entire activity out of the practice journal. So if you look at page 95 on your practice journal, up at the top of the page, it's showing you some different types of angles. So it says identify the type of angle, and it gives us some measurements. So as you go through and you look at these angles, we're going to go ahead and identify them according to their type of angle. So we're doing some review. This is something that you've learned prior to right now. So when you have an angle measure that is less than 90 degrees, remember a 90-degree angle actually looks like this. So notice how this is smaller than 90 degrees in terms of this little opening. Okay, if you were to look at the arc is smaller. So less than 90 degrees would be considered an acute triangle. The way I remember that is acute little angle. So acute little angle. Okay, a 90-degree angle has usually identified with a box instead of using the 90-degree measure. This has a special name, and it is called a right angle. And we'll learn a little bit in this activity about something also that'll deal with right angles. An angle measure that is greater than 90 degrees, but yet less than 180. So notice here, if I do the marking, see how that's a bigger arc than this one here. And so if it's greater than 90 degrees, then that is called an obtuse triangle. Okay, so we have acute little triangle, less than 90. We have a right triangle that's exactly 90, nothing close to 90, just exactly 90. And then an obtuse triangle where you have, it's greater than 90. Even at 91, it is then considered an obtuse triangle, an obtuse angle. Here, the last one is actually showing us a straight line. This would be called a straight angle. Okay, and that equals 180 degrees. Same thing as a triangle. So if you can remember the measures of a triangle, the angles of a triangle, a straight line has the same measures. Okay, so today what we're going to be working with are two types of angle measures, and one of them is called complementary angles. So when you have two angles whose sum, when you add them together, equal 90 degrees, they're called complementary angles. And then we're also going to be working with supplementary angles, and that's when you have two angles whose sum is 180 degrees. So for the most part, kids get really comfortable with solving these as we go through them, and then over time, they forget the names of those types of angles. There are often times that when you're assessed, they assess you using the wording. So a little trick that I have tried to come up with is if you look at the beginning letter of complementary and supplementary, complementary starts with the letter C. And so I remember that I can actually make a 9 out of that. So that's the one that is a 90-degree angle versus the supplementary starts with the letter S. So if I think of making a letter S, I can also make that into an 8. So those are the angles that when added together equal 180 degrees. Just a little trick to maybe help you remember the difference between those two, because I know kids get comfortable with solving using the processes of these two angle measures, but then they forget the names of the angles. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and kind of work an activity using those two. So this is on the, I think it's the same page. Let me look really quick in my practice journal. Yes, it's at the bottom of the same page. So this is still page 95. So we have an activity where it tells us that angles of complementary, remember once again, complementary has the letter C, so we can create a 9, so 90-degree angles. If the sum of their measures is 90 degrees, so sum means to add. If you were to add them together, they have to equal 90 degrees. In the table, X and Y are complementary, so it means they equal 90 degrees. So if we want to find out what Y is, well, Y is going to be equal to us subtracting taking 90 minus 15, right? So if we go ahead and we take 90 and subtract off our x, that will give us what our y is. So if I substitute in first a 15, well, 90 minus 15 is going to give me 75. So 75 degrees for that one. So we're going to work through this one together, and then I'm going to have you guys do letter B on your own. Okay, so then for the next one, I have a 30-degree angle. So now this time I'm going to do 90 minus 30, which would give me 60 degrees. Okay, the next one, I will do 90 minus 45, which is going to give me 45 degrees. 90 minus 60 is going to give me 30 degrees. And then 90 minus 75 is going to give me 15 degrees. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and actually graph this information. So you'll notice here, it says the angle measures in degrees, angle measures in degrees. Well, what's what? These are our x's, these are our y's. So when we read this table up above, this group right here, when you guys work with coordinates, instead of seeing them top to bottom, you're used to seeing them like this, 15, 75. Okay, then the next one would be 30, 60. So I'm going to go ahead and graph this one. So I'm going to go over to 15, which is not on my x line, right? They're going by 10. So 15 would be right in the middle. Okay, so 15 is going to fall between our 10 and our 20. And then 75, once again on my y line, there's no 75, but it goes up by 10. So it's going to be in between my 70 and my 80. So I'm going to go ahead and mark right in the middle of this box or close to it. Okay. Okay. So then my next one is 30, 60. So this one's done. Now I'm doing 30 and 60. So over to 30, which is right on a line, up to 60, once again, right on a line. So that one's done. Okay. And we'll just continue in that fashion. So 45, 45. So over to 45, up to 45. Once again, we have to go in the middle of a box. 60, 30, over to 60. Up to 30 on my y line. So that one's done. And the last one on the x is 75. So over to 75, up to 15. So we're in the middle of a box again. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead, draw my line through there. And when I do that, I end up with my graph looking like this. Okay, so here's my graph. We just went ahead and did that, and you should have been marking it as we did. And now, just to kind of tie in with stuff that we learned back in chapter 3, let's go ahead and write a y-intercept equation for this. Okay, so remember our y-intercept equation, and you will do this also on your own on the next one. So our y-intercept equation is going to be y equals, remember this is our slope, and then we guys have an x, and then this is our y-intercept. Okay, so where I always like to start with the y-intercept, where is it crossing our y line? Well, it's crossing right here, which is 0, 90. So that would be plus 90. And it's positive 90. So that's why I'm going to put a plus sign. Okay. And then when we go to do our slope, there's a couple different ways that we can do it. We can either use our information that's up here, and we can find a change in our y's. We just have to remember to reverse those two, because right now it's x on top versus y. But remember, it's rise over run when we do slope. So we would have to do our change in our y's. So if I find the change in those, 75 minus changes to subtract 60 would give me 15 as my top number. And then over a change in my x's. So I'd have to work it also. 15 minus 30 would give me negative 15. So 15 divided by 15 is 1. It's a negative line. So you end up with negative 1x plus 90 for our y-intercept equation. Okay, and what did we do? Well, we logically worked our way through the problem and said we're going to take 90 minus the x. When you write it out in y-intercept form, it reverses those things because the x is the thing that we're consistently changing. So that was the slope area. Okay, so now what I want you guys to do is go ahead and pause your video, and you're going to work your way through the supplementary angles. So let me slide up really quick so we can read through the directions. It says two angles are supplementary. Remember, supplementary starts with an S, and we can create an 8, so it's the 180 degree measure. if the sum of the angles of their measures is 180 degrees, in the table, X and Y are supplementary. So you're going to go ahead and pause your video, work your way through this one, write your Y-intercept equation, and then when you're finished, you're going to go ahead and come look at my answer key to see if you did it correctly. Okay, pause your video, work through this one, and then you'll jump back in just a few minutes. Okay, hopefully you were successful in that previous activity of working with complementary and supplementary angles. Remember, complementary starts with a C, and we can make the number 9 out of that. So complementary means 90 degrees. And supplementary angles start with an S, and if we took that S, we could transform that into an 8. So supplementary angles equal 180 degrees. So here's a couple questions where they're just having us work through some wording. So in each of these blanks, we're going to use the words either always, sometimes, or never. Okay? So it says if X and Y are complementary. So complementary, remember, C makes a 9. So if they are 90-degree angles together, both X and Y are always acute, sometimes acute, or never acute. Well, if you have to have 2 angle measures and they have to equal 90, can they be a right angle? No, because a right angle is one angle that equals 90 by itself. They can't be over 90, so this would be always acute. And these are always tricky because you have to really kind of think your way through them. Letter B, it says that X and Y are supplementary. So remember, supplementary starts with an S, and we can make an 8 out of that, so 180 degrees when they're added together. Then X is always acute, sometimes acute, or never acute. Well, if I were to take a supplementary angle, that's 180, that's like a straight line. And I split it anywhere. I'll split it here. Here's an acute angle right here. Okay, so it looks like it can be acute. Does it always have to be acute? Well, let's do another line. And if I were to split it right in half, straight up and down, well, they could also be right angles. So it can't always be acute. And we've already identified that sometimes it can be, so it can't be never. So this would be sometimes. Okay, because sometimes you could have a right angle. Letter C, if X is a right angle, so we know that X is a right angle, then X is always acute, sometimes acute, or never acute. Well, X is a right angle, so therefore it has to only be a right angle, so this would be never. Okay, so that's just working with some different wording, having us kind of work our way through that process. Okay, this next activity is just working with some angle measures and understanding how to read an angle according to a 3-letter setup. So here, if you look through this on this diagram that they're giving us, some angles you can go ahead and name by a single letter. So for example, where I have just a single angle, like right here, this angle, this corner is not being split at all. There's only one angle there. You can then name it by a 1-letter angle measure. Okay, so how is that different than another situation? Well, if we look here we have another corner that has D involved. The reason I cannot just name this angle D is because really it is made up of 2 angles. I have this angle here. Okay, and then I also have this other angle that's making up the rest of it. And really, there's 3 true angles here because I also have this full right angle that's, I'll try and do in yellow. Okay, and if I were to just say angle D, well, you wouldn't know if I was talking about the red angle there, the blue angle that's in that corner, or the yellow angle. So when you're working where you've got more than one ray, that's line coming from an angle or a vertice, then you have to start naming those according to a 3-letter combo. So if I were going to name the blue angle that's here, this blue line makeup, well, there's 2 ways that I can name it. One of them would be to do from B to D. It's like a connecting the dots to E. Okay, and so that's the one that they currently have stated right there, B, D, E. Okay, the other way that I could have done it is I could have just worked that connecting the dots backwards, and I could have also named it E, DB. So another way that I could have named this would be angle EDB. Okay, so what you need to realize is when you write them out with the three letters, they can be reversed. The key thing to notice is that in both of these, they have D in the middle. Okay, the angle that you're talking about is going to be your middle letter when you have a three-letter setup. Okay, so if we were to do the red angle of this lower right corner, the red angle, well, one of them would be B to D, sorry about that straight line, to C, so BDC. Okay, and we're just talking about our red angle here. The other way that we could have done that would be just to reverse that. I could go from C to D to B. So angle C, D, B. And notice, all I did was reverse the order of these. But once again, D was in the middle. Okay, if I were to do the yellows, the yellow angle there, well, I could go from C to D to E. So I could do angle C, D, E, or I could reverse that and do it the opposite way. So angle E, D, C. Oops, and then I wrote in E. Okay, so that's working with naming angles according to a three-letter combo. Remember, it's like connecting the dots. You have to make sure you go in the order of that angle. You can't just put the three letters. If you're talking about D, D has to be in the middle of your letter combination, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and do the activity that they're asking us a couple of questions on, and I'll help you kind of identify where they're talking about these. So here it says, name all of the pairs of complementary angles. So complementary angles equal 90 degrees. So in order to find complementary angles, because they didn't give us any angle measures, we wanna be able to find a 90-degree angle, a corner. So here is a corner, 90 degrees, right? But that is only one angle there. It's not split. Here's a corner, 90 degrees. Once again, it's just one angle. It's not split by a third ray. Here's a corner. And this one is split. See how it's split into two angles? That one and this one. So that is going to be one of your combinations. So let's go ahead and work our way through this one. We'll do this one together, and then you'll do a second one on your own. So one set are the letters that we just worked with. One of my sets of angles is going to be E, D, B. So angle E, D, B. And you can write this right underneath of yours. I just didn't have space on mine. So I'm just writing my letter A answer right above. Okay, then the other part that makes up that angle, that 90-degree angle, would be my C to D to B. Okay? Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to go through and identify where there's another set of complementary angles. So once again, let's look for 90-degree measures. Okay, here's a corner. Once again, 90 degrees, it's not split. All we have is this right angle. Okay, so we're done with the corners, but if you notice, here is a corner of this inside box. Here's our other set of complementary angles, is what's making up that corner there. Okay, so you're gonna go ahead and write out the two angles that are truly making up angle B. So go ahead and pause your video, work your way through that one, and then you can check with my answer key to check your answers on that. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and start up with the supplementary angles. So once again, now that we've practiced going through and reading angles with their three-angle name, supplementary angles are an S makes an 8, so 180 degrees. So this is where we're gonna have a straight line set up that has then been split by a third line. So when I go through and I look at this, well, I have straight lines here. That straight line is not split anywhere. Granted, it comes off to the side, but then on A, like here, but that creates a corner. That's an 80 or a 90-degree angle. So that won't work. So we can't use that side. We have this side also that's a straight line. Once again, not split. Yes, it goes off in this angle, but then it is just an angle by itself. It's not splitting the straight line. Okay, so when I talk about splitting a straight line, how about here? The bottom of this straight line, correct? And I know it's in gray, but there is an angle measure that's going straight up here. See how we split this straight bottom line, that FED? We split it directly in half. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and do the angle measures that make up that 180 degrees. So one of them is this angle. Okay, so when I traced that yellow, I went from B to E to F. So I have angle B, E, F. Okay, the other set that makes that up, well, would be the other half, or this blue side over here. So B, E, D. And when I put those together, they make that full straight line. Okay, when I slide those two angles together, they created this straight line. Separate, they were not a straight line together. They were two right angles. Okay, so now what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and do the other set. There's one other set. I'll even help you identify where it's at. Well, we already eliminated the two ends. We just did the bottom. So here's your other set. Right, here's a straight line that has been split into by this angle right here. Okay, so you have that yellow, or sorry, that red. And then how about if we called this the yellow angle? Okay, so you're going to go ahead and do the two angle measures that make up that straight red line. And when you're finished, you can check with my answer key. Okay, last thing, I'm going to have you, this is not in your practice journal, so you're going to have to just maybe on that page, there's some space, or how about on page 97? There's a couple questions on the page 97 that we're not going to go through and discuss out. So on page 97 in one of those open spaces, why don't you go ahead and answer these two questions? So I want you to draw this on your page 97 in one of those blank spots. And then I want you to identify a set of complementary angles. There is only one set of complementary angles. But when you go to do supplementary angles, there is more than one set that you could use. So I want you to identify one set of complementary angles and one set of supplementary angles on this figure. So draw this figure on page 97 and then go ahead and identify those. And make sure you put a C for complementary and an S for supplementary so that I know which set is which. Good luck with this, and when you're finished, you can go ahead and have me check that. Remember, complementary has the letter C. You can make a 9 out of the letter C. And supplementary angles start with the letter S, and you can make an 8 out of the letter S. So those are the angles that equal 180 degrees.